Great. My name is Lisa Feiner. I'm one of the founders of Sharp Again Naturally, and I wanted to welcome you tonight. We have a really wonderful webinar for you. For those of you who may not know, Sharp Again Naturally is a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2012. And we educate and empower people, the public and the medical community, to take charge of their cognitive health and general well-being. And we offer support and resources to improve and potentially restore cognitive function using a scientifically based and multi-therapeutic approach. So this is part of our ongoing webinar series where sometimes Sharp Again coaches will present to you, and we're so lucky tonight to have Dr. Ilene Naomi Rusk. So I'd like to introduce her to you and then give a couple of housekeeping directions before we start. So Dr. Ilene Naomi Rusk trained as a neuropsychologist in England and Canada, and then moved to the US and founded the Brain and Behavior Clinic and the Healthy Brain Program in Boulder, Colorado. While training in a functional medicine approach to reverse cognitive decline with Dr. Dale Bredesen, she developed a team-based program to integrate functional and personalized brain health coaching with trauma work to optimize cognitive and psychological health. She has authored numerous neuroscience papers and woven spirituality and mindfulness into her clinical practice for over 35 years. Dr. Rusk's work blends personalized integrative healthcare and psychological wellness into a model for brain health. We are really so proud to have her on Sharp Again Naturally's Medical and Dental Advisory Board. So just quickly before we get started, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. We will take those at the end, as many as we have time for. And now I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Rusk. Thank you so much for being here.
I am equally proud to be on the board of Sharp Again, and thank you for the lovely introduction and for inviting me. Tonight's talk is going to be, for you who do not know me, some of you may know me. I am a neurobehavioral consultant, as Lisa said, and I'm going to be presenting a talk today for about 45 minutes, and then there'll be time for question and answers after that. Oops. So it's not advancing, and I wonder about that.
There you go.
I'll start here. Okay, perfect. Now it does. So many of you may not have seen this slide, but it's actually a recent CDC slide showing the gravity of the situation with Alzheimer's disease. And actually this slide, I'm just noticing, also shows the racial and ethnic disparities with Alzheimer's disease. And the fact is, we are we're in the middle of a pandemic still, but we're also in the middle of a silver tsunami. That's not just aging, but it's all of the brain-related problems associated with aging, and often cognitive decline is unfortunately associated with aging. Alzheimer's disease is the 6th leading cause of death in this country. And I recently read that it's the 1st leading cause of death in the UK, which is really startling. 5.7 million people in this country are diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and this number is expected to rise from around 5.5 million to 14 million in 2060. And I think the reason why Sharp Again and I are here today is because there is so much we can do for prevention. The problem has been that there's not been a systematic approach to dealing with Alzheimer's disease, and that single targeted drug strategies have not been successful for Alzheimer's treatment. And I can personally attest to that because I was one of those researchers who tested novel treatment approaches, looking for the silver bullet targeted strategy beginning about 35 years ago. So what is it? Well, what is the solution now? Well, we actually have an integrative functional medicine approach that we can use to deal with root causes of cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease. And all of these things that I'm going to be talking to you about today engage the power of neuroplasticity. But what is neuroplasticity? Well, we used to think that the brain was fixed and that we couldn't grow or develop new nerve connections, new neuronal connections throughout our lives. But indeed, we have found out over the last number of years that our nervous system is very flexible. And neuroplasticity is actually what we need to engage for brain health. And I'll speak more about that as we move along. And the key is we can develop skills and we can change our minds and our brains and with intention and with practice and with effort. Keep remembering though, that our brains are constantly responding to the environment that we put ourselves in. So we have to be aware of our external environment, stressors around us, pollutants around us, and many other things in our external environment, as well as what's going on in our internal environment. And that could mean stress, it could mean latent infection. And I'll be speaking a little bit more about that later on in the talk. And here's some neuro words. As we learn neuro words, I just want you guys to remember that learning new things every day, and I'm sure that Sharpen teaches that in their coaching programs. I know with our patients, we're always encouraging patients to become challenged and learn new things. And one great way to increase positive neuroplasticity is to learn new things and challenge ourselves with novelty. So here's some words, some neuro words. Neurogenesis is the generation of new neurons. Actually, new neurons can continue to grow in the brain up until the end of life, which is really exciting, especially in the hippocampus. Neuroplasticity, what we're focusing on today, is the ability of nerves in the brain to change and grow and make new connections throughout the lifespan. Again, the potential is enormous for us to make these positive new connections. And positive neuroplasticity is when these neurons and pathways grow and make these connections with each other. Negative neuroplasticity is when nerves and pathways die off or diminish. Synaptic pruning, well, if you can imagine that the synapse is the space between two neurons connecting, pruning is just what your gardener does, or you do, to branches on a tree or bush or rose bush, imagine, that are no longer needed. They're not going to grow a flower, they may have died. And so those branches need to be pruned because they are no longer being used or of utility. And the same thing happens actually in our brains. So babies' brains have about 100 billion neurons when a healthy baby is born. And that's 15% more neurons than we actually have when we're adults. And that's pretty amazing to me because it means that we're actually born wired for absolutely everything. And then neurons fade away depending upon whether they're used or not used. And this is the same principle that can protect us from cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease, to engage our brains maximally and keep our nervous systems healthy. And this is a picture of a neuron that a child drew. And if we have questions about that later, then I'm more than happy to talk to you about that. And this is your first test of the evening. What is neurogenesis? What is synaptic pruning? And what is positive neuroplasticity? So I'm actually making a joke, but in fact, learning new things every day, as I said, is really important. So if you want to go over some of the topics in this presentation by looking at it again, that would be great. You can always review it tonight and do your new learning. So what are the things that we do that can support positive neuroplasticity? We can have calm in our day. We can insert moments of calm into each day. We can move our bodies for brain health. We can nourish. Gut health impacts brain health. We can stimulate, which is increasing our cognitive stimulation, our movement, increasing novelty, increasing our daily challenges, and stimulating our thinking patterns. We can sleep, and it's important to go through all stages of sleep and cycles of sleep. Our brain needs oxygen at night. I'll speak a little bit more about that later. And to be creative is something we sometimes forget about, but so important. To sing, to have fun, to laugh, to make art. Sometimes those are the things that go to the bottom of our bucket. And I want to encourage everyone to bring those things to the top and forefront. We can connect. That's another thing we can do to engage positive neuroplasticity. And that means making meaningful and social connections. And what about negative neuroplasticity? What are the things, the obvious things that engage negative neuroplasticity are things like having a stroke or having a traumatic brain injury. And those are things that necessarily occupy brain space or kill brain cells that do not enhance connectivity. It shrinks connectivity. So I've broken negative neuroplasticity into the 5 S's. That is, being solitary or alone is not good for the brain. Being sad, chronic depression is a risk factor for dementia and affects the hippocampus and other brain regions. Being stagnant and not moving our bodies means we're not growing myelin and we're not creating new synaptic connections. Sleeplessness, lack of sleep, can't be overstated. And again, that's one of the things I'll speak a little bit more about in the later section of the talk. Being stressed. And we all know what stress has looked like in the last year. And this pandemic has really created chronic stress for us, and we don't always know we're experiencing it. But chronic stress can increase stress hormones like cortisol, and that can be very damaging to brain tissue. It can be difficult on the gut. It can increase inflammation, and it can really affect the efficiency of the immune system. And I think we're going to find out more and more about that as time goes on and we're relieved from being in the middle of the pandemic. I've just presented a lot of options and possibilities for you around the neuroplasticity, the possibilities for positive and negative neuroplasticity. And what I'd really like is throughout this talk for you to just settle in and take in what is most important to you from this material and see how you might weave it into your own life. Because there'll be too much information to take absolutely everything in. So find one or two things, one or two modifiable things that you want to work on that are meaningful to you and possible. So the next slide, well, let's talk about stress. And there are several faces of stress, as I call them. There's eustress, and that's the kind of stress that's positive. It's not a bad thing. We are wired for stress, so let's use the word challenge instead. The first type of stress is eustress. That can feel exciting or motivating. It could build our performance. It might help us face a fear, like taking a hot air balloon ride, as you see in the slide. We might be afraid of heights. And then when we get to the top, we get this great sense of, oh my God, this is so beautiful. I feel such a sense of relief. And so we've faced a fear, seen some beauty, and we'll do it again and challenge ourselves. The next type of stress that also helps build us up is called hormesis. And it's usually a scientific word, but I'm using it in this more psychological context. And it means that our muscles or our cells or our molecular pathways are getting conditioned and adapted by low levels of repeated stress And it can actually improve our capacity from a biological point of view. It can help us handle greater stress if we stretch ourselves a little bit. It's this third type of stress, distress, that we usually associate with stress. And it really has to do with the persistent challenge that we don't feel relief from. And with this type of distress, we can either get hypo-aroused and get sad or depressed or collapsed, or we can get hyper-aroused and feel irritated or angry or frustrated. So those are two main things that our nervous system does with repeated stress or trauma. As I said, transient stress is very good for us. We're wired for it. And there's a normal stress response where we face a stressor, like a big dog with big teeth chasing us. We run, our sympathetic nervous system gets very activated. We run, we start increasing our heart rate. We feel safe. The dog can no longer find us. We've found a small alcove to hide in. The dog runs by and we feel like, oh, this great sense of relief. And that's a normal stress response. And again, I said, it builds us. We get that few relief feeling. But some stressors just don't go away. And COVID has been an example of one of those stressors that's taxed our nervous system and our bodies. But this type of stressor can be anything. It can be having a difficult boss at work, having a strain with a family member that has a difficult time being resolved. So we really want to pay attention to those chronic stressors because persistent stress affects the body and the brain in huge ways. And part of the reason I put this image on the slide for you all was because look at how many things you can't even read them. And this is only some of the impact that chronic stress can do to the body. In fact, even transient stress, but we said transient stress can be strengthening. Persistent stress, though, can affect the brain and it can increase your risk for cardiac illness, immune challenges, autoimmune challenges, and other illnesses as well. And for the purposes of this talk, I really want to emphasize that chronic stress can really increase your risk for mild cognitive impairment, dementia, and even mental illness. Chronic stress causes persistent inflammation in our bodies and actually can change the structure and function of certain brain regions, which you may or may not have known. Frontal areas, hippocampus, the amygdala, the alarm bell of the brain is the amygdala, the one that signals us to be alerted to something scary. It's a strong emotional alarm bell in our brain. Those structures can change with chronic stress. Chronic stress also changes our vascular health. With repeated stress, the blood-brain barrier might become leaky and the gut may become leaky as well. Chronic stress can raise our blood sugar and it can interfere with sleep, which is where we consolidate memories and we also clear toxins during sleep. And what I want to emphasize here is that our brains are threat detectors. We're constantly scanning our environments for threats so that we can stay safe. And this past year, our threat system has been overloaded. So I'm suggesting that we learn to work with this disposition that we have. We are predictability. We love predictability, but we're also built to be threat detectors. And our brains tend to be like Velcro for negativity and Teflon for positivity. So I'm just going to give you an example right now. And we tend to notice more negative things in our environment. And I'm just going to invite everyone, whether you're in your living room or your kitchen, just to look around your room, and I'm doing it too. Look for something that's positive. Look for something that's lovely, like a stone or a piece of art you love. And just gaze at that piece of art or that beautiful thing. I'm looking at something right now. I don't know if you can see. It's a picture of Frida Kahlo that I bought in Mexico. And it's a positive image. And we can actually do that by gazing at something positive in our environment and just kind of noticing what it feels like to take in something positive. It's a healthy practice. So I think I've convinced you that both threat and safety live in our nervous systems, and that stress is not bad. Good stress challenges us and makes us stronger, and facing our fears is a great thing to do so long as we're safe. The nervous system, though, can be divided into two distinct parts, and it's more complex, and I'm happy to talk about that at question and answer period. But the sympathetic nervous system, again, engages us. It increases our alertness if we're in the face of a threat. It increases our heart rate. It increases our blood pressure and even our breathing. And then when we feel a sense of relief, the parasympathetic branch kicks in and decreases our heart rate, decreases our blood pressure. It's the rest and digest. I feel safe again. You know, sometimes you're like, phew, I'm so relieved. That's the parasympathetic nervous system. And we want a balance between the two. But the key is we want recovery from that stress response. We want relief, recovery, we want renewal. And so here we are. We're going to talk about the things that can help with positive neuroplasticity now. We're going to talk about gut health, exercise, cognition, and stress. But I'm going to, first of all, share with you those modifiable factors that we can engage. Just repeating something I said, but diet, exercise, sleep, all the things you hear from Sharp again, I'm sure. Cognitive challenges, clean air, water, and food, and understanding your stress. These are 10 root causes of cognitive decline that Sharp again will teach you about, and I teach my patients about in the clinic all the time. And some of the root causes are toxins in food, water, and air, the effects of certain medications and also medical conditions, metals, hormone imbalances, and we're noticing that chronic low-level infections can really affect cognitive health. The ones I've highlighted for you in green are the ones that I'm really focusing on today, though. Food, physical activity, stress, sleep, and physical and emotional trauma. Let's first talk about food. Our gut is our biggest connector to the outside world. That's quite a statement. So our GI system is our biggest interface with the outside world. And the vagus nerve, which is a long wandering nerve that connects our brain and our gut and our body, it's one of the main connections, right, between the gut and the brain. The molecules that we absorb from food can be inflammatory, and all stress affects this feedback system between our gut and our brain, very often through the vagus nerve. The gut microbiome provides messages to different parts of the body and communicates with the brain. And the gut also communicates with the immune system and can affect our sleep-wake cycle as well. Oh, in addition to many other things that we don't have time to talk about today. Inflammation in the digestive tract leads to permeability of the intestinal wall, leaky gut you've heard of, I'm sure, which can also create an immune response. And permeability in the digestive tract is often associated with permeability in the blood-brain barrier, that barrier that's meant to protect the brain from pathogens or toxins in the body. So the summary of this slide is a healthy gut and a healthy immune system usually equals a healthy brain. And specifically about food, some takeaways for you are there's a lot of evidence that eating more leafy greens, fruits, and nuts has the potential to prevent inflammation in the gut by creating a healthy, varied gut microbiome. And I'm going to invite you to check out plant-based diets and brain health diets, Whole 30 and the Mind Diet. And you can find these on my website as well. It turns out that a higher intake of plants, as I said, over animal foods, with a preference for smash fish, and those are small fish. They are usually freshwater fish, short-lived, like mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring are good fish. The long-lived fish tend to accumulate metals and toxins. Avoiding gluten to protect your gut from the gluten is important for brain health. And as are avoiding sugars, alcohol, processed meats, mostly because of nitrates, simple carbohydrates, and usually I call that beige food, pasta, white potatoes, French fries. And in terms of food, I'm including fasting in here. Intermittent fasting, which we can definitely talk about at another time, is good for some people. Of course, with all these things, you have to check with your practitioner because they know the particulars of your body. But fasting overnight is healthy. We normally fast overnight anyways, but creating a gap and not eating right before bed, several hours right before bed, or an hour after you wake up, it tends to be a very good practice for brain health. And what are some other things that we can do for brain health? Well, we can exercise, and there are many types of exercise. So when someone says, I'm walking, is that enough? I say, that's fantastic that you're walking. And I want your exercise routine to be varied. And in every day, do several types of exercise, not just one. Aerobic training is good for oxygenation and blood flow. Resistance training, I like to say slow and low. You do not need heavy weights, slow and low, and you can Google it, but there's a lot of evidence that slow weight training with a lot of deliberate focusing on the body, interoception means looking at the body and feeling what's going on inside the body. That's something we can really enhance with resistance training. Complex balance training is excellent for various brain regions, also the coordination of both hemispheres. And I'll talk more about that when I talk about yoga and Tai Chi. And high intensity interval training is great for people with mild cognitive impairment or as a prevention strategy. It turns out not to be a great exercise strategy for people with more moderate or severe dementias. It doesn't seem to do much good, and it may actually do a little bit of harm. Here's some new research showing that signals from your muscles can protect you from dementia. And this is a recent study within the last few months. Muscle exertion creates a protective response that delays aging in the retina and aging in the brain. Isn't that amazing? The stress signals help prevent the buildup of misfolded proteins. And maybe this is protective against Alzheimer's, the researchers say. And the takeaway pearl for you is that the right kind of stress can be protective against aging and create adaptation and resilience in the body and protect the brain. I talked about physical exercise just now, but what about cognitive exercise? Cognitive challenges that you do each day, often each day is my recommendation, should be difficult and engaging. And one way to make them engaging is to be interested in that. So I recommend, and then sometimes I even spend time just talking to my patients about what's really interesting you that you haven't really focused on yet. Are you interested in another country or maybe your ancestry? Study that, study something you're engaged in and be challenged by it. I do recommend using online programs in conjunction with day-to-day activities that are challenging because there's some evidence that these online programs can be like medication and we can dose it. So online cognitive training, I believe, should be done 5 days a week for about 15 or 20 minutes a day. And there's some evidence that particular types of cognitive training can be especially good, like speeding up your information processing. That means training your brain to think more quickly. It seems to be protective of cognitive decline, and I can talk more about that. And just to summarize, variation in what you're doing and novelty in what you're doing are very important for keeping you connected to what you're doing and for maximal benefit. So why did I put this slide in? This is one of my favorite slides. And speaking of cognition, it turns out that what we think about really matters. Our brains listen to what we think about. So here's a little heads up on some new science about thinking. It turns out that repetitive negative thinking is linked to a risk for dementia. These researchers presented this study in 2020, and it's part of a bigger collaboration across Europe looking at the benefits of meditation. But these researchers found that people who had repetitive negative thinking had amyloid and tau in their brains before they even had cognitive decline. So I think that's very significant. And it gives us an avenue to make some changes. It gives us an opportunity to think about our thinking, to work on our thinking. But having some control over our negative thinking might be helpful. And how might we do this? Well, meditation and mindfulness practices can help us with this, with our thoughts, and can also help focus our attention to the present moment to help us mitigate our stress. Our minds wander, it turns out, almost half of the time we're awake. And this piece of research comes from Harvard. Dr. Killingsworth, hope that's his name, at Harvard, did a study with many thousands of people. It was a very eloquent study and showed that 50% of the time we are actually not choosing what we're thinking about. We're basically thinking about the past or thinking about the future. We're having regrets, or we're ruminating, we're fretting, we're resenting, but very often, 50% of the time, we're not just in the present moment. And in order to have more present moment awareness, we need to have intention. What do we want to be thinking about? Do we want to be thinking about positive things and focusing on positive things in our environment? And what do we want to be attending to? What do we want to be putting our attention on? And so right now I'm going to just do a little present moment awareness exercise. It's a little mindfulness exercise that you could do right now with me. So as long as you're not driving, I want you to just take a look at your hands, or one hand if you're holding a phone, and settle into wherever you are sitting or even standing right now. So I'm just going to invite you to notice where you're sitting, where the pressure points are in your body, if your back is touching a chair, or the backs of your thighs are on the sofa. Just take a moment and allow your mind to just pay attention to inhaling and exhaling, slowly and smoothly. And I will do it with you. Noticing the exhale and focusing upon a long, slow exhale. And now I'm just going to invite you to look at your hands and notice the ridges in your hands. Put all of your attention onto your hands, if only just for a moment. And get curious about the difference in coloration of different areas, the ridges and lines you might not have ever noticed. And just appreciate where these hands have been, what they've touched. that some part of your mother's and grandmother's hands are in your hands as well. And just appreciate your hands. And you can take a breath again and put your hands down. And that was just about a 30-second opportunity to be in a mindful moment. And you can do that absolutely anytime. And it turns out that with repeated practice of that mindful, intentional attention, you can increase gray matter in your brain. You can calm down the amygdala, the emergency alarm bell center. You could slow down brain aging and increase the gyrate in your brain, the curves in your brain. And you can even increase your hippocampal size depending upon how much you meditate. That mindfulness practice that I just spoke to you about, and all of the other many kinds of meditation practices, can be combined with physical movement activities as well. And these types of movement really benefit the nervous system. They have a mindfulness component, a physical movement component, and they can be done online so easily. Yoga really helps us slow down and notice our mind and our body, but so do Tai Chi or Qigong. And these practices, I said, they allow us to cross body lines, work the cerebellum, the back part of the brain. They allow the hemispheres to work together, and they do increase positive neuroplasticity, just like all the other things I've been sharing with you today that increase positive neuroplasticity. And this is a sleep slide. We're going to start talking about sleep now, something else you can modify to increase positive neuroplasticity. And this is a darling picture of a huge local sow that my daughter took last week at a local farm. And in this picture, I heard the video, this is just the picture. This sow is sleeping so deeply and snoring so loudly. And I want you all to be sleeping soundly and for long periods of time, each and every night. Not too long, but I bet many of you on the call now, and many of my patients have sleep problems. And if there's one thing that you can work on after this talk, it's tweaking your sleep just a little bit to make sure that you're going through all of your sleep cycles and that you are really having deep restorative sleep. There's a recent study that very well done recent study showing that midlife short sleep duration of less than 6 hours was linked to dementia later in life by an increase of 30%. So that should be a very motivating piece of data for you all, that good sleep is so necessary for restoration and repair of the brain. So identifying any sleep disorders like sleep apnea, making sure that we're well oxygenated at night is crucial. If you snore or if you have cognitive problems, I know that for my patients who I know snore or have cognitive problems, I always suggest that they have their sleep assessed, and you can even do simple at-home tests now for sleep apnea. Deep sleep does many things, but allows us to have a clearing of toxins from the brain. There's a glymphatic system in the brain. It's like a nighttime plumbing cleaning system. And it's very important that actually sleeping on your side, it turns out, that we clear toxins from the brain at night. And so another reason why sleep is very important. And as I said before, during sleep, we consolidate memories from the day. We also strategize ways to deal with difficult situations, often in our dreams. And dreams is a whole other slideshow, but dreaming is so important for our emotional health, our spiritual health, and our physical health, our cognitive health too, actually. So the takeaway pearls from this slide and sleep are: keep the room dark and cool. Cool tends to stimulate melatonin, which allows us to fall asleep more easily. Don't use blue light. Use special glasses. The ones that I have on today, I think, are those type of glasses. Exercise earlier in the day. Don't use stimulants like caffeine in the afternoon. Waking up at the same time every day seems to be a little bit more important than going to sleep at the same time every night. So try to wake up at the same time. Yes, even on weekends, they say. Try to wake up at a similar time each morning to develop a regular circadian rhythm. And I recommend to many of my patients who can't sleep because they're worried, we tend to take things to bed with us, things that we don't need for our sleep, like worry, distress, and rumination. So when you're brushing your teeth at night or brushing your hair, I recommend that you have a little journal that is what I call a worry journal for nighttime, where you can vent, you can get rid of some of your daily concerns and not take them to bed with you. You can just be free at night by committing some of these worries to that journal, and commit also to looking at them in the morning when you wake up. It's not like you're forgetting your worries. You're like, just give me a little break while I sleep. I promise I'll take care of that grocery list of worries tomorrow morning. And while I was preparing for this talk, what I recognized is that the habits of brain healthy people are very similar to the habits of stress resilient people. So as we're building positive neuroplasticity with sleep, with movement, with positive social connection, with all of the things that we talked about today, we're also building stress resilience in addition to brain health simultaneously. Bonus. So some of the common things are a consistent sleep schedule, to move and groove your body, to eat a lot of vegetables and plants. And something we didn't talk much about, which is a very passionate subject for me, is it's important to work with difficult feelings like fear or shame, grief, and with trauma. This provides us with a sense of great relief and satisfaction and freedom. Gratitude and positivity habits, very important to practice each day. Social engagement, but not just social connection that is meaningful, fun, where there's kindness and warm exchange between you and the people you're with. And it could be in the grocery store too. Warm, meaningful, connected interactions. Spirituality, connecting to something other than just the material world, connecting to something that is meaningful to you, that is part of your purpose for being here. It could be a legacy that you're creating that you want to leave. It could be that you connect to nature and feel a sense of wholeness and deep connection in nature. It could be God. You could have a deep spiritual faith and not believe in God. But whatever it is, developing a connection to something that's more than that which is right here is very good for stress resilience, wonderful for happiness, and good for brain health. And finally, mindfulness and breathwork practices. So the take-home messages that I'd like to leave you with are: you can develop your positive neuroplasticity. You can redefine some of your stressors as challenges. And many of these lifestyle modifications are Alzheimer's prevention strategies. Building resilience is key here. And knowing how to calm the nervous system is really good for brain health. We become resilient not by avoiding our stress, but by leaning into it and facing some discomfort and moving through it to a feeling of success and relief. We become resilient by choosing to take on some challenges that we might not have. And rather than avoiding them, just approaching them, one small behavioral change, one small challenge at a time. And now might be just a great time to think about what that one little challenge that you want to take on is right now for you. So I'm not sure of my timing.
You're doing fine. You've got
Okay, good.
time.
Okay, good. But I just want to let you know that I'm actually going to go back to this slide. This is an important slide because I presented a lot of possibilities and possible behavioral change and ways to increase brain health and positive neuroplasticity. But I'm going to impress upon you that habits change slowly with deliberate intention and with achievable goals in mind. And I was actually serious when I said, think of one or two things right now that you might want to work on at the end of this talk, things that will make you healthier, lean into your challenges, maybe create more of a sense of confidence, knowing that you're facing a challenge. That'll be good for your nervous system, for your stress reactivity, and for your brain. So that ends the formal presentation that I planned for you tonight. And going back to this slide about our clinic, we are the Brain and Behavior Clinic in Boulder, Colorado. We do most of our work now by telehealth, secure telehealth. I do brain health checkups all over the world. We're very fortunate to have been trained by Dr. Bredesen, and um, I create personalized neuroplasticity plans for people and do consultations all over the place. And we have a bunch of people in our clinic. I'm the only one who's the rascal not wearing a mask in this photo. I'd like you all to note that. That's part of my personality. In our clinic, we do neuropsychological testing, and we also do brain health coaching, like Sharp again. We do cognitive training for people. Most of us are Bredesen trained, and we do resilience psychotherapy. And that really means to help work out some old issues that you might have carried with you from your past that may need to be released now for the sake of your nervous system and for the sake of your brain. And thanks very much. You can go to my website, ilenenaomirusk.com. And I have a lot of free brain health tips on there, some articles on brain health and nervous system health, some articles maybe on ancestral healing or trauma that I do, and a tip sheet on how to create calm in the nervous system. So I want to now introduce you to our wonderful hostess, Lisa Feiner, who's going to talk to you about her small group programs. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. That was
Pleasure.
really a wonderful presentation, and we always learn so much. And this was no exception. You really introduced us to some new ideas. So one of the things I just wanted to let everyone who's listening know is that Sharp Again Naturally last year started a small group program to help implement some of the ideas that you mentioned tonight. Um, because sometimes you have the information, but it's hard to convert it into action. And so we've developed a program. It's a 10-week program that includes 2 one-on-one coaching sessions and 6 group coaching sessions. So you have the support of not only health coaches, but also your fellow group members. And we've had wonderful feedback and response from these programs. And sometimes, you were saying it's small steps and change happens a little bit over time. And these testimonials just say a little bit about what some people have found, that energy levels have improved, or they've been able to cut down on snacking, learning from other people, that the group support and the coaching are helpful. So we have a program actually starting next month in June, and I would just encourage everyone to, you can either email us or you can go on to our website, and Gloria will put in the chat box the link if you want more information. But you know, Dr. Rusk and her clinic and Sharp Again Naturally, we're both here to help support you in making these changes and improving those aspects of your life that really will make such a profound difference in your brain health as you get older. And, you know, that's our mission, and that's Dr. Rusk's mission, and it's why we're here.
That's
So
right.
if you have questions, I encourage you to put them in the chat box. And I just wanted to let you also know that on the 20th, which is a week from Thursday, we have our next webinar on 5 tips to sleep better in 2021. And as Dr. Russ said, it's been a tough year for a lot of people. And sleep is one of those things that, you know, has been difficult for many of us. And Dr. Dr. Shelby Harris, she's going to come and she's going to talk to us about sleeping better in 2021. So thank you all for being here. If we have any questions, we can take them now. I know we're getting to we're at the top of the hour almost.
So far, no questions.
Yeah, so far we don't have any questions.
Oh, wow. You know, you're welcome to email me also on that website. I think it's mail@bbcneuro.com. And you might want to put that in the chat, mail@bbcneuro.com, because I am so happy to be a resource and even help you find providers where you live, which is something I seem to do just about every day for people. Because what Lisa and I talked about is we actually are here to serve you and the health of your nervous system and your brain. And sometimes that just means finding good providers in your area or pointing you in the right direction. So if there are no questions, then I'll leave it with Lisa, and feel free to contact us anytime. And thank you very much for having me. I
We
appreciate
do
it.
have one question. Someone's asking, are you seeing a link between celiac and Crohn's disease and dementia?
It's such a good question. What we're seeing is, and I actually haven't read a specific paper linking that, but because I talked about the gut-brain axis and the importance of vagus nerve health in, can I stop my share now or should I keep it on?
You can stop it.
Okay, can you still see me? Oh, I don't know what's going to happen. I think I won't. It turns out that illnesses of the GI tract cause openings, junctures, openings in the gut, and there's an indirect connection between illnesses of the gut and brain health, because lipopolysaccharides basically, toxins enter the bloodstream when there are those junctions in the lining of the GI tract. So toxins then affect the immune system. The immune system gets activated. There seems to be a relationship between cytokines, you've heard of cytokines because of COVID, and openings in the blood-brain barrier. So my short answer to you is that more toxins will probably, and this is speculation, but if you have celiac or Crohn's or chronic gut illness, you will have a greater likelihood of having toxins or infections in the brain.
And I think that's true for many things where if you have inflammation in the body, it
That's right.
causes inflammation in the brain. And I don't think that in our world with our medical system, we always make that connection.
I
We
agree.
somehow think they're separate, but they definitely are connected.
So whoever was in the audience who asked that question, if you asked your allopathic general practitioner, they would probably say, no, it's impossible. Unless they were informed in a functional medicine approach and understood the connection between gut health, the inflammation, the immune system, and brain health. So that was a great question. Thank you.
Thank you,
One
Mary.
more question.
Sure.
This interesting comment about the UK Alzheimer's being #1. Would it be the diet, or what is the element that you might have been able to look into?
I haven't studied that. I was shocked by the statistic. I haven't studied that. I don't know if it's smoking. There are likely, what I didn't say in this talk, but that is, critical for this whole model that we're working within, the root cause model, is that we have many modifiable things that protect us. Well, in the UK, there may be more alcoholism, there may be more smoking, there may be fewer vegetables eaten. I haven't taken a look really at the root causes in terms of lifestyle, cultural things, lifestyle things, food, diet related things, pollution. It could be that the increase is because everyone who tends to get Alzheimer's disease, the proportions are in cities. Or so I'm telling you that there are so many root causes of dementia that it could be any one of those things or an additive or potentiated effect of several of them. That would be my answer. And I really will look into it, because that's my speculation now, is that it's numerous things colliding. I lived in England for 7 years, and yeah, it really depends where you live and
Yeah, I lived there 5 years, and that all makes sense.
Yeah, I hear you have an accent, but I don't know where it's from.
And we have another question. Someone's asking, I have a parent who is hyper-focused on round-the-clock hydration, which impacts sleep. Any recommendations or comments?
That is a really good question. Is that a thirst thing? There are a lot of questions. It could impact sleep if they're needing to go to the bathroom many times a night. There may be a way. I recommend that my patients, if they cannot drink right before bed, that's great. But people have so many other medical root causes. That seems like it's a great question to ask their physician first. Is there a reason they're so thirsty? Is it a thyroid problem? I don't know if it's a male or female. So it feels like there are many questions to be asking about that. I think hydration is very important. People don't realize that dehydration is associated with cognitive problems, but even slight dehydration is associated with cognitive problems. But my question is more like, is that like why the interest in so much hydration? Why the thirst? Is there another
She's written said that the belief, he believes he needs to protect his GI tract from cramps.
Oh, so that really sounds like it's either an anxiety problem, a GI problem, but something that needs some love and attention from someone who understands the GI system, or why why he's having those needs or urges. Why would water or hydration prevent cramping? And yes, it can really affect how many times you wake up in the middle of the night. So if there's a way to curb drinking before bed, that's great.
And this person should also contact the doctor, as you said, because there could be a mineral imbalance, right? There could be other things that are causing cramping.
So many things. It could
Yeah.
be anything from magnesium to a food allergy to so many things that I couldn't even possibly responsibly touch upon. But that's something that would really be worthy of a physician visit or an integrative physician consult.
Great.
There's another question. Is there a best time to meditate? First thing in the morning or before bed?
I love that question. The answer is yes, there's a best time. It's whenever you feel. I like to pair my meditation with waking up and going to sleep and then smattering it during the day. But if you could link your meditation, just like with any behavior that might be a little bit challenging or something that you might have resistance towards, setting a time in the day, like the morning, I don't get out of bed until I do my breath work or a guided meditation for 15 minutes. I don't get out of bed until then. Or I don't have lunch until I sit for 15 minutes. So pairing it with another behavior is really healthy. And then you deciding what time of the day is best for you to do that pairing is perfect. That could be right before bed. It could be in the morning. Just linked to another activity of daily living for you. And usually once or twice a day is what I recommend. But if you can only meditate for 1 to 5 minutes several times during the day as well, that means you're just being in that state of present moment awareness intentionally, like we did with our hands, or gazing upon something that appeals to us, that's beautiful. So that's another mindfulness practice that you can do intentionally throughout the day, maybe at the top of the hour.
Thank
So
you.
I hope that answered your question.
So I think we'll leave it here. And thank you again, Dr. Rusk, for sharing so much wisdom tonight. I got so much out of it, and I'm sure many, many other people listening did as well.
Thank you.
So thank you all for joining us, and we hope you'll tune in to our next webinar on the 20th. Have a good night.